Enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussion. And Good Company gives you a seat at the table to enjoy smart and engaging conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Melinda Haines, the CEO of the Literacy Alliance, Fort Wayne. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
So let's start with telling a little bit about the Literacy Alliance, because when people think of literacy and reading, we all always immediately think about children.
Yes.
And the Literacy Alliance is really targeted for adults. So tell me the whole background, history, purpose of the Literacy Alliance.
Sure. Well, the Literacy Alliance, first of all, I have to kind of explain the name a little bit, because when people think the Literacy Alliance, they think, oh, you teach people to read. Well, we do, but we do so much more than that. And as you say, we are working mostly with adults, but as I get a little further in the story, we now have an aspect where we're working with children as well. So the Literacy Alliance has been around in this current form since 1988. And it was started to help adults who needed to improve their basic academic skills. And mostly what we do is work with adults who dropped out of high school and did not get that high school diploma. So they come looking for that because they either are unemployed or underemployed and realize they're not going to get any further without that. So they come to us to work on that diploma. And most of them are 18 and older, although there is no average age, and we've worked with students as young as 16 if they've officially dropped out of school. And we've worked with adults in their 60s and 70s. And everybody has a different need. Some just want to read to their grandchildren or something like that. But most of them want that high school degree. A lot of people know that high school degree as the GED, because that was the term that was used for many, many years. But actually,
a general education degree.
Right, and actually,
it was a high school diploma equivalent, right?
Correct, and actually the GED is a brand name, like the SAT or the ACT. So you're thinking, tissues versus Kleenex. But the state is the one who determines what test is actually given. And so a number of years ago, the state transitioned from giving the GED to what was called the TASC, the Test Assessing Secondary Completion. And at that point, because we didn't really like that acronym TASC, it sounds like a terrible thing you have to accomplish, we started referring to it generically as the high school equivalency diploma. So the HSC, we refer to it as that. And then just this last year, the state has again changed their test, and it's now the HiSET, and I can't even tell you what that acronym stands for, so that is a good reason why we stick with the high school equivalency as the generic term. So most students come looking for that, and they stay with us anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months or a year or longer. We meet them where they are. Some of them who maybe graduate or didn't graduate, they just dropped out their senior year. They have, they're pretty close to getting that. Others might have dropped out earlier, 9th or 10th grade, and have some work to make up. So they're each given an individual plan, and then they're in class with us. And we get them to that finish line. We don't actually give the test, but we prepare them for the test, and then we celebrate with them when they get to that point.
So before we talk some nuances and specifics about the program, tell me your background and how you got to the Literacy Alliance and this work.
Well, I have been in this role since January of 2020. Prior to that, I had been at the Purdue Fort Wayne Community Arts Academy for about 8 years, and I really enjoyed working there. It's a great place to work. And Purdue had purchased Kaplan and created Purdue Global. And
They purchased
Kaplan. It was
the
Kaplan
testing
University.
company?
Yeah, well, the testing and also
that was owned by the Washington Post. They bought it from it was originally Stanley Kaplan.
Okay.
And then the Washington Post bought it and expanded it to Kaplan, which was also not only for testing. but online education programs and stuff. Oh, I didn't realize that Purdue. Purdue purchased Kaplan and then made it
Purdue Global.
Purdue Global, and that was really to be for online classes and stuff, right?
It's all online.
Okay.
And so Purdue University offered the opportunity to all employees to work on a graduate degree for free through a Purdue Global, and I had thought, well, you know what, I've always wanted an MBA, and that sounded like an interesting thing for me to pursue, and so I started the program when it was available to me, and I really enjoyed that line of study, and I got through the MBA program in about 11 months. I was just very motivated to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you like doing accounting and online?
I did, yeah.
See, I don't like, I'm doing a program, I am not an online, I find this very hard, this online learning.
Yeah,
thing.
it's not right for everybody, but for the people who can be motivated for it,
no,
it was
wasn't
terrific.
motivated. I just like being in a classroom and having to post responses. It just seems very artificial to me.
It can be, it can be.
So you did your MBA?
Yeah,
okay.
I did that.
So how did that then translate to the...
Well, as a part of the MBA, they have in every class, you're kind of, I don't want to say forced because that's negative, but encouraged to think about, what do you want to do with this degree? I mean, you're working on this degree, what do you want to do with it? And so there were a lot of opportunities to think about what I wanted to do, and a lot of opportunities to take little, assessments and quizzes about what you want to do.
Strength finders.
Yes, those sorts of things. And so as I did that, it said, you should be in development or be a CEO or do something like that. And I thought, well, that's an interesting thing. I wonder what I could do. And I've done a lot of nonprofit work and work in the arts. And I just thought, I wonder what I would be qualified to do locally. Are there any organizations that I could work at? So I started researching, and I knew about the Literacy Alliance. I'd known about them for a number of years. I joined the board, and then it turned out that the previous CEO was retiring, and it came open at about the time I was finishing my degree, and I thought, hey, maybe this is the opportunity. And so that worked out for me. I had knowledge about it from being on the board, especially the marketing committee, and knew that the group was doing wonderful work in this community, and thought, I can bring my marketing background to that, and we can tell our story a little bit better. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today, and I've been blessed to have a wonderful staff. I mean, the staff at the Literacy Alliance is second to none. They really have such a heart for our mission and a heart for our students.
But a lot of your staff is volunteers, correct?
No, well, we have a staff right now of 13, and then we have volunteers who are tutors in the classroom. So in a normal year, we'd have as many as 50. I think through the pandemic, we had about 30, some of them who would work virtually, but we have been back in the classroom since last June. We went virtual like everybody else did, but I mean, as you've experienced yourself, working virtually is hard for a lot of people. It's really important to have that one-on-one work with the teacher and to be able to understand things. So as soon as we were able, we went back into the classroom. We just limited the numbers in the classrooms and have been masked, and went back to it. Our classes for the HSE prep meet 9 hours a week, 3 hours a day, 3 times a week. And so that's a lot of intense class time.
It's a big commitment for people.
It is, but that's what it takes to get somebody to the finish line. So at that point, we went back into the classroom with those parameters in place, and started working with the students, and the volunteers started to come back within the right amount of people. We've had less than half of normal capacity back in the classroom since then. So that's been working for us pretty well, and we just require masks in the classroom, and we're cleaning
Right.
all the time.
Right.
But that's what the students need to get them through.
And what I'm really surprised about is that it's 1 in 10 Allen County residents that don't have a high school diploma.
Yeah.
And I know that they say that if you don't have a college degree, you leave almost in the course of your lifetime almost $1 million of potential pay on the table. So in addition, can you talk about the issue, the impact of not having your high school degree, and why is it that, is that considered a high, to me that's a high rate, that 1 in 10.
Yeah, it's shockingly high, isn't it? When you think about it, you're like, how do you survive, in that way? But there are a lot of people who don't have that, and I think it's become more and more important as we go through life. I mean, certainly in my generation or my parents' generation, a lot more people didn't have it. But maybe they were farmers, or they were factory workers, or it wasn't as important. But in this day and age where secondary education is really vital to a lot of people, that most employers are going to require that as a bare minimum. So some people are just able to get by. But what it leads to is, not only not being at your income potential, but it leads to more health problems. It leads to anything that's going to be affected by poverty. It's going to lead to higher incarceration rates among that population. And it's more that our community has to help
Right.
in those populations.
Well, they say that, obviously, if you look at the idea of illiteracy, which isn't just reading, but, so the job opportunities, your earning potential, but it also impacts navigating systems, understanding procedures. There's lack of a community engagement and voting, people who feel disenfranchised.
Right.
And then one thing that you really talk about is how it impacts parenting.
Right.
So, but before we do that, I want to take a step back, because one of the things that you really talk about, because when a lot of people, when it was the GED and it was a named program and stuff, there is a cost to taking these programs and taking the test. And so partly what the Literacy Alliance also does is making it accessible and affordable. Yeah. So talk to me about that, because one of the facts is we record this show in the library. Yeah. And it makes sense, because the library is a place of learning and books, that they are a good partner with the Literacy Alliance. So talk to me about the program, because I'm sort of still shocked that it's that kind of a commitment of 9 hours a week.
It is.
That's classroom time, right? That's not
correct.
just homework.
That's right. that is when they are required to be in class. And it is truly a community effort, from our funders to everything that other organizations do to help us. Our program is totally free for participants, so anyone who comes to us doesn't pay a thing, and even now they no longer have to pay for the test. Until this year, the Literacy Alliance paid for our students' exam, which is $115, and that's a lot of money for people. And so last year we started committing to paying the cost of that test. This year we just got the good news that the state of Indiana is going to pay for that. They started to pay for a small portion of them during COVID. Some of the CARES Act funds was put toward that, and they saw what a difference that made to people in getting the rates up of people actually taking and passing it. So this year they've given us some more money for that. But we are funded through the Department of Workforce Development, partially. In a lot of states, adult education is paid for or overseen by the Department of Education. But in Indiana, it's overseen by the Indiana Department of Workforce Development. So we work very closely with them to not only provide the education necessary for them to pass this exam, but also to be better qualified in the workplace. We offer customer service certification for students, and when they come to us, they also are required to know how to have a resume and to write a cover letter, to look for a job, through the Indiana Career Explorer. So they're given those tools as a part of class.
So it goes beyond just the literacy. And compared to your colleagues that are at other cities or programs where it's done through the Department of Education. How is it? Do you have a better retention rate because they see the payoff is better, like because you're helping them get the job, or do you see that it's really because it's more targeted to the end goal of jobs as opposed to educate? Do you find it's better, good, worse? What do you think?
Well, here in Indiana, I think that has been the goal. Is like you want to get somebody employed. You want them to get a job, keep a job, and then make more money. That's kind of how you
or making enough money that they can be self-sufficient.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, because in some cases, these are people who are not able to be self-sufficient.
That's correct.
Because if you don't, it doesn't matter if you do not have it, and not having a high school degree doesn't necessarily mean that you can't read or you can't do math. It just means you did not fulfill the state requirements in order to achieve that degree.
Yes.
So it's really about you getting the degree you need.
That's correct. And there are, plenty of successful people who don't have their high school diploma, but in this day and age, it's just really more of an absolute requirement. But our besides funding through them, we are also funded by a variety of other sources, that enable us to keep the programming free. We're funded by various community foundations, by the Fort Wayne Community Foundation, by Follinger Foundation, by James Foundation, by, organizations like that, and also by individual contributions and business organizations and through fundraising. So, those things all work together to help us, get her done.
And, you mentioned that, obviously 2 generations ago, it wouldn't be unheard of that somebody had to drop out of school, or they didn't go to high school, or they didn't complete, because they had to go to work. But today, in the 21st century, are you seeing still, and because there's also truancy laws and requirements of parents that kids have to go to school, are you seeing that there still is a significant number of kids who are dropping out or don't complete the degree? And also because there is also, under George W. Bush, there was the whole No Child Left Behind, and so we were just pushing people through the system. So I'm just curious if you're seeing that we are having the same number of, or less, or what are you seeing in terms of dropout rates?
And I can't give you the exact numbers of have there been more or less, but what we are concerned about is in this pandemic, there are a lot of students who dropped out of high school way more than is normal, because a lot of the dropout rates really depend on the school system. Like Fort Wayne Community Schools would have a higher rate than Southwest Allen County.
They do have a higher rate?
Yeah. And so it's kind of within school system, but the students who come to us have so many barriers that force them to drop out of school that it's not really indicative of the school system. They're usually family issues. They might have a baby, or they might have a drug problem, or they might have, parents who are separated, or they might be homeless. They're these barriers that prevent them from succeeding in high school and force them to go out on their own. But during COVID and what we saw with the graduation rates kind of across the country, we do expect that there will be an uptick in the students who come to us, because a lot of them were being encouraged by area employers to say, oh, come on, I need you, come and work for us. And, a student who would really love to have that new cell phone or have a car, they're like, okay, I'm not going to finish high school. So we think that over the next year or two, we're going to see a slight uptick, from
and
that.
You mentioned that now you're working with children. So did that come out of what you were seeing based on COVID, or and what kind of programs and things are you starting to do with children? Well,
that's kind of unrelated to COVID.
Okay, so let's separate that out.
Yeah, but we are excited about it. There has been a program in this area for a long time called Project Reads. It was started as the Allen County Education Partnership for 4 school systems in Allen County to target children in first through third grade or kindergarten through third grade to make sure that they were reading at grade level by the time they entered fourth grade. If a student is reading at that level when they get to fourth grade, they have a much higher likelihood of graduating from high school. So,
and that's because that fourth grade is that critical year, because from K through 3, it's really about learning to read. It's
yes.
the system of reading. But in fourth grade, it becomes comprehension.
Yeah, it's reading to learn.
It's read and interpreting what you. And
exactly.
If you, it's like I have a friend whose son really hates to read. Is struggling, and I said to him, "Let him repeat third grade. Don't push him to fourth because it's going to be a disaster. Because if those kids, which also I want to ask you because you could try this into about this whole learning to read, but kids don't go to school." Like kindergartners don't go to school hating school.
Right.
But it seems, especially for African American boys, this fourth or fifth grade becomes this time where you really see that they really begin to hate school. And so I'm curious if that's also because of this not reading, or is it our school system? Because I'm also trying to understand sort of what is it about school and the way we teach that causes people to be like, to drop out. And so backtrack a little bit to talk about with kids, but put it within this context that I'm asking you about. Why do kids hate school? And
Well, and I'm sorry to say I do not have the answer
That's okay.
to that. The schools who we work with, they are the ones who identify these students for us. And at Project Reads is mainly volunteer organization. We do have employees who organize the different sites.
And so you go in and become a tutor, like they read to you and the kids to help them read.
That's exactly it. So I think last year there were 18 or 20 sites pre-pandemic, and they would go in after school and work with the students who were identified by the teachers that need this extra help to get them up to grade level. So, and the student is paired with a single adult volunteer. So for 30 weeks, it's a kind of a mentoring relationship as well as a tutoring one, and they meet every week. And there's kind of a group activity and snacks, and then there's one-on-one reading time, and then those students are tested, before and during and after to make sure that they're moving up in those
and they've proven that because that fourth grade is that critical, then they do see if they struggle or they begin to hate school, then they are more likely to not complete. Correct?
It seems to make sense to me. Well,
then there's the other issue also. If you look at the number of people who are incarcerated that do not have their high school diploma, it seems like in some ways that these students, and especially for unfortunately African American males who really begin to hate school, it really becomes like a funnel to incarceration. And so,
and that is a problem in the jails. In fact, the Department of Workforce Development, does have a program that works with the jails in particular to, provide this same kind of programming.
So I have this is more of a philosophical question for you about the benefits of high school. Okay. So, it used to be that we said everybody should go to college. That was like a given. And then partly because of the cost of college, or people were assessing what jobs they would get, but people decided that not, and then we said that not everyone needs to go to college, because there are lots of jobs you could do. You could get certifications and stuff. Do you think that partly, and now we're sort of shifting also a little further away, which to me is that maybe you don't even need any college, to go. Do you think that partly that not is maybe going to impact, or people then think, well, why do I need a high school diploma? Like you said, like I can get a job and I'm getting paid, and maybe it is partly it's short term, because what they don't see, just like without a college degree, is how much over the course of your career or your lifespan you leave on the table.
That's right.
Earning power. But do you think that because we're sort of pushing people, and also what do you think about all of these schools that are like the specific schools, like the school of STEM, or the school? Do you think those are good to keep more people in high school, or do you think that that's losing out? I mean, and this is more of a philosophical, so we're not saying that this is not from your expertise, but I'm just curious, as you working with these programs and seeing in terms of, the people in looking at dropping out of high school and how they perceive education and secondary and beyond. So I'm just curious if you have any insights or thoughts.
Well, that's a lot of questions.
Yes,
I will try to remember.
Yes. Well, you can just,
I don't know if I can do
yeah.
them in order here. I think you're right, or that I agree with the fact that high school it's definitely the necessary thing. I don't think everybody has to go to college. It's not right for everybody, and that has been kind of a shift. But the bare minimum really is the high school diploma. But that said, you get out of an education what you put into it. And it really doesn't matter where you go if you apply yourself and learn something from it. I mean, I am a product of public education my whole life until I went to college, and I went to a very fancy little private liberal arts college.
Where did you go to college?
I went to Kenyon in Ohio. Lovely school. I loved it. My father had gone there, my uncle, my cousin. It was absolutely wonderful
and
education.
That was a true liberal arts education. So
True.
You did not come out, just like I did, you do not come out with the skills for a job. That is not the intent of that education.
Yeah, right. And so, but I did. I got a good job, and I enjoyed that, and I felt fortunate to have had that. And I thought, oh, everybody should be educated like this. And I couldn't understand why everybody wasn't, because I was, not that we were a wealthy family, but I would be a child of privilege just to be able to have even had that education. And so I went with that mindset for a long time, that was the gold standard of education. But I think, especially when I was at Purdue Fort Wayne, and I met so many of those students who were just so hardworking and really had some goals and things that they wanted to do. I learned a lot about their motivations and also the successes that they've had, by applying themselves. Our two daughters went to two different schools. One went to Purdue Fort Wayne, and one went to a private liberal arts college. But those were the right choices for them, and they got out of it exactly what they wanted to put into it. So, and it's the same thing with my MBA, doing that online. I got out of it what I put into it. And so I kind of have that mindset about, our students now. They have obviously reached a point in their lives where they know they can't go any further without at least getting this minimum diploma out of the way. And now some of them go on to college. We have a great relationship with Ivy Tech. And, virtually all of our students come from a home where there is no support for college, that no one has ever been to college before, so there isn't any way to tell them how to even fill out a FAFSA or do anything. So we actually take our students on field trips to Ivy Tech to say this is what it's like to step on a college campus, so they even have an idea of that. And a lot of them, not a majority, but there are a significant number who do go on and do that. And others are happy just to have that HSC because their employer then says, okay, great, you've got it. Now you can, move on. You can maybe move to a management position or have a little more responsibility, something like that. So they have been able to figure out what that motivation was for them to do that. What was this?
So I'm curious to know, when you talk about that, they changed the name, of the test. Usually to me, that's an indication that they're changing the teaching method. Like, we've gone through fashions, like to teach children to read. Like it was phonics based. Then it was more like sight reading. And then now we've gone back to phonics. And now math, I can't even tell you how they're teaching math. And like when you try to help a child and you say, okay, well, carry over the 1 to the 10, they're like, what? And so I'm just curious, like, is that a big thing? And what are the actual requirements? Like, to get your GED, do you still have to do history? It's beyond just reading and math, right?
Yeah, there are 5 areas, and I'm going to see if I get these right, and I might not have them right. But, there is math, there's science, there's writing, there's history, science, I get 5.
Wouldn't there be like
But
social studies?
Yes, and
the
so
government?
so there's those 5 areas, and so there are 5 different kind of subtests that they have to take. And so, when students come to us, we test them to see what level they're at, and we see what their challenge area is. For most of them, it's math, and a lot of them are pretty strong in at least 3 of the other areas. So, we like to get them to a minimum level and then encourage them to go take the test and get the ones out of the way that they are strong in, and then just tackle the ones that are the challenge areas, which are usually, like I said, math, and depending on the student, it could be usually the next one is the English or the writing.
But because the math also, it's not just because it's you're taking a test to get your degree, it's still high school math, which includes, right, algebra and geometry, right, and algebra 2.
Yeah.
So you still, most people probably today, even who got their high school degree or their college degree, probably if you gave them a test on algebra, they probably still wouldn't be able to do it. So do you ever, again, this is not, this is more your just opinion, and because a lot of people will say, well, why do I need to learn algebra? Why do I need to learn geometry? Geometry I can justify with someone, like, because if you're going to cut a pattern or you want to, in algebra it is, for a lot of fields. But what do you say to students when they're here, they're coming to get this high school degree, they're never going to use algebra, but they still have to get it. And algebra is a very hard concept.
It is.
Some people just can't get it. Do you feel that that's, again, this is a philosophical question, that really merits what should be decided upon is the equivalent of getting a high school degree?
Well, I don't know that it is
what it
is.
But I'm just wondering, maybe it should be really better to have people be able to do adding, subtracting, multiplication, fractions.
Which you assume that they do know that by the time they get to those levels. But those are also the things that we help them learn if they don't.
And
or
a lot
to
of times
brush up.
Fractions, are you allowed to use, because on some tests you can use a calculator now.
Yeah, you are. There are certain calculators you're allowed to use, and in fact, I think in this new HiSET, if you take the online version, there's a built-in calculator in the computer that you're allowed to use. Yeah.
But I just wonder, this is more philosophical. If we're trying to get people to earn a degree that allows them at a certain path, like it's sort of like, if you're going to go back to college at a certain point, they give you life credits, okay? So they give you credits for certain skills and things so that you don't have to take the classes.
Right.
I'm just wondering, again, this is a philosophical question, but the other thing I'm wondering about is, what is the differences between teaching adults versus teaching children? And how, and probably, for a lot of kids, they have to be there. They have to be in school.
Right.
So what are the issues like that, and what are the differences, and what are some of the challenges and things that you hear from a lot of your students? And
well, the barriers that most of them face are transportation issues. When you're a kid, you most likely don't have to worry about your parent is going to take you, you're going to walk, you're going to get on a bus, and that's not an issue. For adults, that can be a real barrier. A lot of them don't have cars. We provide bus passes for students who need to be able to get to us. We're in high need areas that are near bus lines.
Are you
mostly
in libraries? Or?
We have our own classroom at the Summit, which is off of Rudisill in the old some people know it as Fort Wayne Bible College or as Taylor University. We're down there. We have a dedicated classroom. We also have a classroom in New Haven at Redeemer Baptist Church, and we have some of our what we call pre-HSE. When a student comes to us with lower than a 6th grade reading level, we won't immediately place them in a HSE prep class because they wouldn't be at a level high enough to understand that. So we have what we call a pre-HSE class for those students. Those meet in our classroom and also here at the Allen County Public Library. And then we also serve Adams County and Wells County. And in Wells County, we do meet at their public library. in Bluffton. And in Decatur, we just moved from their public library to our own classroom space in the Merritt Center, which is city-owned. It's an old school, old elementary school that they're repurposing for all kinds of adult education and community resource places. So it's a variety of community centers and libraries and things like that.
And are the majority of people who come to you, I mean, most of them are working and they probably have families too, right? I mean,
yeah, and that's another part of the challenge. I mean, when you're in elementary school and you're 8 years old, you don't have a family to worry about. You don't have, other people who are depending on you. A lot of the people are single parents and they have young children or have other child care issues. We have several who've come to us who they've got kids in high school who want to drop out, and the kids will say, well, Mom, I don't know why I should stay in. You didn't stay in. And that spurs on the parent to say, well, I'll show you and I'll get this done. And they want to be a, inspiration to their child. But the barriers, I mean, some of them, they've got food insecurity issues. They have home insecurity issues. These are just things that children, some children, of course, have those face that, but they're not responsible for it. It might be affecting them, but it's just a lot harder when, and the ones who are working are trying to juggle. I got to go to work, I got to go to school. That's why we offer classes, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, to be able to meet those needs.
And then, because on COVID you had to go all online, are you continuing to offer online? Because a lot of, it's interesting, like a lot of religious organizations found that when they offered their services and things via Zoom, they saw like 300% increase. So are you able to then offer, because that would be ultimate flexibility for your students? Is that still a possibility?
Well, in theory, it sounded like a great idea, and we started that way. I thought, don't waste a good crisis. Let's see what we can learn, and maybe we'll have a virtual class. And what we learned is that our students really work best in person, and that's what we're really good at. When we were virtual from March through June, it was a struggle to get our students to a class. Number one, because they don't have the technology,
and the broadband issue.
The broadband issue,
just like the children students have. This would be adult learners would have.
I couldn't imagine just going to class on a phone. Virtually all the students have a phone, but that's hard. How do you do your homework? In classes, we have computers for everybody. We were able to get a grant to get a library of Chromebooks that we can now loan out to students, which is helpful. But for the ones who don't even have internet access at home, it's yet another barrier. So that's another one of the reasons they come back to class. What we are able to do with those few students who do feel like they can only be served online, there is an Indiana online class that we can refer students to who can be served in that way.
With all the barriers and with this 3 hours, 3 times a week commitment, and this is for like 16 weeks, you said?
Well, it depends. It depends on the student.
Okay. What is your retention and completion rate? Do you have a lot of people who, just like they dropped out of school, they start and stop?
Yes.
And how do you address that? Because that must be very frustrating for you. And so talk about that part of this, and how do you measure your success? Because, talk about that.
Yeah. Well, we follow metrics very closely. And, when I say out of context, 46% of our students earned their high school equivalency. People who are, really doers in this world go 40%. Oh, it's not very good. But it's actually really great when you put it into context. Last year we did 35% of them actually graduated, 26% the year before. So we have continued to hone what we do to get people through the program. And our rates compared to those in our region, we're in Region 3, are better than most, and compared to the state, they're better than most. So we're really proud of what we do, that we are what we were able to do because we're small. I think that has a lot to do with it, and our staff is just so dedicated. But you're right, they drop out of the program, especially if they don't want to be there. You know, we do have some referrals who really don't want to be there. Maybe they're referred by their parole officer, and as a requirement of their parole, they're required to be enrolled in class with us. So they may only stick with us until parole is done, or, you know, if they are at a halfway house and they're required to go.
Is that a big part of your program? Because I was surprised. There was one story I was reading online about a judge who said that as part of, I guess, whatever sentencing, that the person had to come to the program. Is that a big part of the program, to be used as either to prevent recidivism or as part of sentencing? Is that, or whenever, is that a big part of the population?
I wouldn't say it's a large percentage, but we will accept anyone who wants to come to us, and, you know, as long as they can fulfill the requirements of the program, which include being in class 75% or more of the time to keep their seat, they are welcome to be with us.
But does Allen County find, or the other counties find, that having their either people who are on parole or on halfways, do they find that this is an effective program to prevent recidivism, or is it effective to helping people get that, you know, back in, you know, that leg up to really be able to be self-sufficient?
It certainly would help them do that. I mean, that's why they're making that requirement, to say, you know, if you earn this degree, you're more likely to keep on that this path to growth.
Just like with the frustration of teachers, you know, in school, and so, you know, this with adults and seeing them start and stuff. Tell me about your staff and the teachers, and are they, you know, retired teachers or previous? Tell me about them.
Yeah, well, and also I kind of want to revisit how we keep the people in the program, and, you know,
well, I would also think that's a lot to do with the teacher.
Well, it is, and the staff, how it works. When someone is interested in our program, we ask them to fill out an application. And every step along the way, we have people who drop out immediately. You know, they may call us or email us. They're directed to the application. Well, have to. I think the rate of people who visit that page for the application and then actually complete an application is about 56%. So they fill out an application, and then they're invited to come in for a one-on-one meeting with one of our staff. They come in, and half of them don't show for that one-on-one appointment. So we lose them again. The half that come in for the one-on-one appointment, you know, they're given an explanation of the program, what those expectations are, what they can expect of us, how long it can take. Let's talk about your barriers. How are you going to get here? Are you working? Are you, you know, so that they understand what's expected of them. And then if they say, yes, I want to do this, then they are put into an orientation. And we have rolling admissions. So we have an orientation twice a month. And so they're put into the next orientation. And we rotate the orientation days from morning, afternoon, and evening, just to try to accommodate everybody. Half of them who are put in an orientation don't show up to orientation. So they show up to orientation, and then they're given a battery of tests and explain what the program is, and, you know, again, reminded that you need to be there, you know, 75% of the time. We'd prefer 100% of the time. They're given their test results and placed in a class. And again, some then don't show up to class, you know. And so, you know, but we count these metrics everywhere: how many people came to us, how many actually made it to orientation, at what point are they enrolled. Okay, but those are metrics,
and if I was a teacher, or if I was on your staff, and every time I saw this, I would just keep getting frustrated. And what difference are we making, and what is the purpose? And I, you know, metrics, okay, fine, but reality is you're facing this every day. So what is that like?
It is truly the people behind the metrics. And in fact, that was one of the things that when I started, and I asked our staff, I said, you know, what are the great things? What are the, you know, things that you'd like to change? Yeah. You know, and a lot of them said, well, I don't like the metrics because it's about the people, you know, but you got to have both, because you've got to have some sort of measurement. You can't just say, oh, look at Sally's story.
You have to have that because for funding purposes.
Absolutely. Right. But there are people behind there. And the teaching staff, we have teaching staff, and we also have site coordinators, and they work hand in hand in the classroom. There's a site coordinator and a teacher at every classroom. The teachers just teach. They, I don't want to say just teach, but that is their primary responsibility. Right. The psych coordinators do a lot of the administration, just the nitty gritty of the attendance and the, seeing what other needs the student might have so they can get them the right resources. And so by the time a student actually gets into class, that's the first time the teacher meets them. Okay. The psych coordinators share in the duties of the one-on-ones and the orientation, so they've started to meet these students. But the dropout rate is high, and that is frustrating. But when you see the students who succeed, that's why you do it. I mean, and if it sounds like you went and read some of our student stories on our blog, on our website, which I would recommend anybody go read because they are so inspiring. The things that these folks have overcome to get there, that's why we do it. I mean, we are there to help them get there no matter what they've been through. I mean, it boggles my mind when I read these stories because I think I've been so fortunate to never have had that problem in my life.
Well, you sort of say that your students learn something even more valuable than the subject matters in order to get the degree.
They learn they can do it.
Well, you also said they learn hope.
They do.
So can you talk about that?
Well, hope that, and I think it's not just hope, but it's that they have the ability within themselves. And I think that's what gives them the hope, is when you realize I've earned this degree, what that means for me and for my future, that gives you that outlook.
Well, you invest
and that
in
hope.
yourself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you do.
I mean, it's the same when I say with college students, and they talk about, I always say there's good debt and bad debt. Mm-hmm. Bad debt is credit card debt because you want a stereo that you can't afford.
Right.
Good debt is you're investing in yourself and your education. Mm-hmm. So that's that self-worth and self-esteem and achievement. But the idea that also I think that's in some cases, if they really were people that didn't like school or found that, or there was those teachers and just...
they don't like the rules of school.
Right.
And most of them, we always get their stories, when they leave. That's kind of a requirement of, we want to know about you and you can capture this. And when they graduate, and we put it on our blog, and they almost always credit the teacher and the psych coordinator. It's that human who was there for them to provide that support system that a lot of them don't have or don't have an abundance of in their life. And so to finally have a solid base, that's the sort of thing that can provide that hope, because you're like, oh, there are people out there who are willing to help me, and it motivates them to want to do their best and actually achieve that goal.
And so who are the teachers that you have? Are they semi-retired teachers? Are they teachers who, and how long have they been with you?
Well, they're all of that. I mean, our teachers range in age from late 20s to
so you have
older.
some that are just right out, like their first teaching job?
Well, I don't know that it's their first teaching job because they're experienced, but they have a heart for adults.
Well, because also when you go to school to become an educator or a teacher, they don't, that's why I said the difference between teaching adults and children, because if you go through an undergraduate program to become a teacher, it's typically in the K through 12 system.
That's right.
There's not a program where you learn to teach adults. So that would be the first part of it that would probably be different.
Right. And there's a lot of professional development that's available, through the Indiana Association of Adult Education that our teachers go to help learn new skills, particularly for working with an adult population. Some of them have taught before in public schools, but most of them just have a heart for working with adults. And some have been with us for many, many years. And I've only been there now a year and a half, and they've all been there much longer, than I have. But they like working with adults, and in having that particular skill set of working with a wide range of levels when they come in, especially because we're small, we don't have the ability to say, okay, you're going to be at this level and you're going to be at this level. They're all in there together, and that's why we really need the volunteers, because the volunteers will work one-on-one with people at their level.
Right. And so I'm curious, so you've been there a little over a year, and you got this MBA that said you could apply it to be a CEO. And so what have you learned? And what's been things that surprised you? And where are the gaps that you feel like you still need to learn?
Well, and I knew going in that it was a terrific staff, but every day I am amazed at what these people are capable of doing to push the mission forward. It makes my heart so happy every day to just go, wow, look at what they're doing and to do this. I'd never had a role like this before, and I felt that I was prepared, but not completely prepared, but it's like, okay, just buckle up and see what happens. We don't have anybody else who does anybody else's job where we are. We're small, everybody has their responsibilities, and yeah, we can cover a little bit, but nobody's duplicating anybody's job. And so I have very specific things that I need to work on, and those are sometimes the biggest surprises, because you think, oh, I thought I would be doing fundraising. I knew I would be doing fundraising, but I didn't know X and Y would happen, or it just things that you learn every day, and also just having to deal with setbacks, because I think when you don't have a lot of setbacks, you don't learn anything. You've got to learn from those things and say, okay, how is that going to help me the next time? I don't know, probably, I think it was when I was working on my MBA as a form of, was it relaxation, whatever. I started doing these word games, myself playing on my tablet, and I just have to do that, every morning. I spend about 20 minutes running through these 5 or 7 games, and also just some games that sometimes it's just total luck if you win or lose. It has nothing to do with how smart you are or how strategic you are. And I realized after a while how valuable those were to teach me about how to deal with setbacks. And I've started to dub it my daily dose of failure. I need to have that every day, that something happens that's beyond my control, so that I go, okay, well, that's all right, let's try it another way. And so those are the kinds of things that, when they happen, or it's like it didn't go the way that I thought it would go, it's like it's given me the background to say, all right, we don't have to do it that way. We're going to try it another way, and you just move on and you don't dwell on it.
Do you think that's also helps you to better understand, sort of walk in the shoes of the setbacks and the issues and the frustration and the failure of your students and participants?
Well, I hadn't really thought about it that way, but I think that there is some truth to that, because our students generally have had a lot of setbacks, a lot of obstacles in their way that other people haven't, and that can really wear you down, and you have to learn how to overcome those things positively and keep moving forward.
Yeah. So, well, at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game.
Okay.
So this is a game, but hopefully it'll be a little bit more. What is your favorite word?
Yes.
What's your least favorite word?
No.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Reading.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Noise.
What sound or noise do you hate, or do you love? Sorry.
Water.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Like screeching or fingernails on a chalkboard.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Professional knitter.
Is that a profession?
I could like to make it one.
What profession would you not like to do?
Garbage truck driver, or yeah.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Patience and perseverance.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
My dad.
How would you like to die?
Peacefully.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Welcome home.
Well, I want to thank Melinda Haines, Executive Director of the Literacy Alliance, for having a seat at our table. And you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.